But yeah, that's enough about Contrary. With that being said, let's welcome Ritvik, our first speaker. So yeah, Ritvik actually started his own company called Entrepreneurshop, and he will talk more about that and the great success of that.
Sweet. Thanks everyone for coming out. Today I'm going to be talking about how we started, grew, and sold our startup for a multi-million-dollar offer during COVID as college students. And in doing so, hopefully we'll share some of the insights that we learned from building out the startup in case it helps you guys as you're starting your own. So a little bit of introduction. So I'm Ritvik. I started my entrepreneurial journey back in high school when I was just building apps, hacking together code from Stack Overflow that I didn't understand, just posting things on Reddit to get users. I truly started trying to build out something at a larger scale when I came into college with Gort's Grilled Cheese, which was supposed to be a hyper affordable food delivery service for college students with just grilled cheese. And so the idea was that UT has a hyperdense population. So instead of having one driver go deliver food from a restaurant to one customer, we can send one driver out and get a lot of people in one shot, making the cost of delivery cheap for each person. We sold a couple thousand sandwiches there, but I got tired of running between Jester and Kins, so we shut it down at the end of the year. Second startup was Apply.fyi, which is a like internship data company that helps you learn more about different data points for internship. So interview processes and salaries. So if you're looking for an internship to apply to, you can go to our website, look at the different salary data points for the companies you're interested in, and then apply and also submit your own. So we grew that to around 50,000 users and sold to levels.fyi, which is another salary transparency data company. And then the meat of this presentation is going to be about Octoshop, which was something we started back in March of 2020. And we sold that to the cashback company Ibotta in September of 2021. So after I did that, work with them for a few months to integrate Octoshop into Ibotta's ecosystem, and then started a job at Google as a software engineer. So I'm going to basically break down the session into two main parts. First is going to be about how we came up with the idea and product. And then the second piece is going to be growth and marketing. So realistically, to a startup, these are kind of the two main pieces. You come up with an idea, build it out, and then market it. So we'll split into two parts, and then at the end, have some time for Q&A. So starting out with the idea, Octoshop initially started as a website to help people find inventory during the peak of the COVID inventory crisis. So if you guys remember, back in March of 2020, toilet paper and Lysol was pretty much out of stock at almost every store in the country. People were standing in long lines to get what they needed. Were afraid of catching COVID in these lines and eventually not even getting what they came in for. And the problem that I saw watching the news was just that every single news station was covering this problem to where people weren't able to get what they needed. And so we realized that a lot of this inventory information is actually available on the retailer's website, but it's tough to go in and search up the inventory of each store location to figure out what you need or where to find what you need. So we built out the website in stock, which lets you type in the name of the product you're looking for and enter your zip code. And then we kind of aggregate all this retail inventory information and put it in one place so you can easily find out what store has what you need near you. So this eventually got, I think in the first 2-3 months of launching, 850,000 people who searched for something on the site. But this was mainly due to the fact that we launched really fast. So timing was key to in stock. The news stations were already covering inventory being out of stock. And since we launched within just a week of them covering these stories, they kind of just swapped their stories out for ours and said that, oh, these college students are working on this thing to help solve the problem. So just with news stations chaining off each other, we got these 850,000 users. But eventually, this isn't very sustainable. InStock was kind of like a one-off product that lets people come in and search for something once during COVID. But once toilet paper came back in stock, no one's using our site. It's not very sticky. There's not much else you can do to the site or do with the site, and it's not monetizable either. So like we were able to send people into the stores, but we didn't get a commission off anything that we were helping users buy. And so with it not being sticky and not being monetizable, we were left making like a little bit of revenue through just donations and ads, which really wouldn't have been sustainable long term. So we were looking at, or we were talking to other competitors and looking at problems in the space and opportunities, and realized that one big opportunity with e-commerce is affiliate links. So instead of working on a physical retail location product, we decided to pivot to e-commerce, where affiliate links essentially enable you to generate revenue from the sales that you're redirecting to a retailer. So if you, for example, have an affiliate link for Walmart and you send it to a friend, they purchase something for $200. Walmart gives you between like a 0.5 to 8% commission, depending on what that product is. So we wanted to kind of do something in the e-commerce space similar, and also address some of the similar problems that helped us grow with InStock. And so looking at problems in the space, we realized that the main issue with e-commerce is disparity. So the first of these disparities is the disparity across retailers. So you can buy the same product at different retailers at different price points, making it hard for you to know what the best retailer is to buy what you need. The second issue is like fluctuations within a specific retailer. So Amazon's constantly optimizing their prices. So prices are changing sometimes even up to multiple times a day. And inventory is also fluctuating. And so this was the key thing, again, with InStock and Octoshop, is that like things were still out of stock. So while toilet paper was back, things like the PS5, graphics cards, the Nintendo Switch were all still out of stock. So it's tough to know when these things are going to come back in stock for you to buy. And also scalpers were picking these things up super fast, so you couldn't just check the website ever so often. So our solution to all these problems was building a browser extension. So here's like a quick demo of the price comparison feature. So this is to address the disparity across retailers. You can see that like when you're on Best Buy, we'll compare prices across tons of different stores and show you if there's a cheaper price somewhere else, in this case, GameStop. And then the second piece or main piece to our extension was the restock and price drop alerts. So when you're on a product page, you can just click on an item, select the level of alert that you want, and then you'll just get a browser notification as soon as it's back in stock, so you can try and beat the scalpers to getting what you need. So the benefit of doing this as an extension versus a website was that we can actually bring people in for something they need, which is inventory, and then have them stick around with other features like price comparisons. So it's a lot more, it's pretty much infinitely more sticky than InStock, because a user might come in to use something like a PS5 stock tracker, but then all they need to do to be a daily active user of the extension is just not delete it. So there's no change in user behavior. People will, as long as they're shopping on an e-commerce site and they don't delete us, we have like a chance to like keep them as an active user and generate revenue. So a couple learnings from product. I think one of the main things I've learned just over the years building stuff is that you kind of need to think through your idea to understand if it has all four of these pieces. These are kind of the key things to making a startup work. And I think it's pretty much really useful to validate the idea you have for a startup in general, and also validating specific features that you want to add to a startup. So prioritizing things. So like, when you're building a startup, the first thing that you need is user acquisition, right? So why is your idea positioned in a way to easily get new users? So for InStock, it was timing, right? So everyone was searching for these different products. Everything was out of stock. News stations were still covering it. Things were going to be shared really easily. So it was really good for acquisition, but retention and monetization weren't as good. So we weren't able to retain anyone, and we weren't making any money from these users. So I think there's also like a sort of balance between acquisition, retention, and monetization, in that maybe something is like, if something has really good monetization, maybe you don't have to acquire as many users. So you can get away with having like a really strong monetizable product and having like maybe 100 customers who are paying you a lot. So there's like a sort of balance that you need to consider, but I think it's really important that when you're coming up with ideas and validating things, that you really think through all of these things. Because I guess like one thing that people sometimes recommend is that you just focus on growth and don't worry about the monetization until later. But I guess I personally feel that it probably makes more sense to just think about how you're going to eventually monetize, because there's like different products and different products require different strategy. If you're working on a social media app, for example, and your goal is to maybe get to like 5 million users, maybe it doesn't matter at that point. You want to build something that's getting daily active users, 5 million daily active users, ads will pay for, or ads will generate enough revenue for you. But if you think that maybe it doesn't have as much scalability to get to 5 million, maybe you can get to 10,000 or 100,000. You really need to nail down monetization early on, or you're just going to have users who aren't making you any money. And especially if the users aren't sticky and there's no retention, you're not going to like have a product that lives for very long. So then the second piece to this is finding good co-founders. So really a huge key to our success was just the team. And so going to a bunch of these events on campus and meeting people who have worked on things in the past, especially, will help you kind of find people who are willing to go all the way with the startup and not just come up with an idea and work on a little bit of it and quit. So I met Darshan through a class at UT. He's worked on tons of things in the past. I think he had like over like 1 million total users on like all of his projects, even before starting this. And then Sriram, like you guys probably, some of you might have used the UT registration extension. He worked on that. I met him also through a UT conversion event. So just like networking on campus and meeting people who have worked on things in the past and are really passionate and have proven themselves to do things will help you find good people who will stick through the journey. So now moving on to growth and marketing. I'm just going to go through a couple of examples of some of the key campaigns that we ran to actually increase our user base. And so one thing to note with these campaigns, especially this one, this is like a Reddit post where we're just talking about how you can use our tool to get the PS5 or to get PS5 restock alerts. One thing to note was a huge part of our success, as I mentioned earlier, was focusing on things that people really need and are timely to bring people in, and then having them stay with the other features. So a lot of our marketing was actually focused on these like restock alerts because they're very timely and people are actually actively looking for where to buy these things. And less so about the price comparisons, because even though it's cool and useful, it's not very timely. People aren't thinking about it at the time. So this is one of our Reddit posts that really picked up. So it's just a video of like me going to a PS5 and just setting the restock alert. And so it's pretty simple, but there's some key things that I did in this post that I think really helped it gain traction. So the first thing is it's a video. You really like whatever you're doing, you want to show instead of just telling someone. And just watching something work is a lot more magical than just hearing about it. So images and mainly videos, like whatever marketing you're doing, videos are going to be like the best way to convey your product to someone. And then I guess the other thing with the post is how I structured the title. So it's really important. Like once you're able to sell the magic to people, it's also important that you're not trying to, like no one likes to be sold to. You don't want to actively sound like a salesman. So you want to kind of phrase your advertising in a way where it seems relatable to people. So a couple of pieces in the title that I included here on the Reddit post were that we worked hundreds of hours to build this thing. We're a few friends in college building something to help people. And also like everyone hates scalpers. So we're trying to help you compete with and beat these scalpers who are scamming people on eBay. So a lot of like small pieces in the post kind of changes the vibe of the ad. And then this is like our second big piece was just a TikTok post.
What's your $1 million idea for an invention?
So a few friends and I spent hundreds of hours building a browser extension that automatically compares prices when you're shopping online. So say you're shopping for AirPods at Best Buy and have our extension installed. Octoshop automatically compares prices across hundreds of stores in the background and tells you when you have a better deal at a different website. In this case, Octoshop found that you can save $40 by buying these same AirPods at Sam's Club. If you spend 10 seconds to get to your computer and install it, you can save hundreds of dollars over the course of your shopping online. So a couple pieces with this. First thing, again, it's a video. I'm showing people the magic of how it works. It's really cool to just see like different comparisons show up, and like with no extra effort on your end, you're able to find a better deal. But the second main thing I think here is just watching out for trends. So this was actually like a trend at the time where people were talking about their $1 million ideas, and it worked out really well. So I just made a video for the trend. So keeping up with trends and also trying to like look at competitors who are doing some like innovative strategies, like keeping your eye out for new innovative strategies by other companies will help you like come up with like marketing ideas to do things, especially like college companies. I feel like are more scrappy than others. So like looking at what they're doing and trying to see how they're trying to see how they got users with no money is a pretty good way to start coming up with ideas for some of these campaigns. So yeah, I guess with these two and a couple other campaigns, we grew to over like 135,000 users. A lot of this, keep in mind, was just word of mouth. So there's only really so much you can do with your own campaigns to grow something, unless you're running ads and you have like a cost of acquisition per each user, and then you have some amount of money they're generating that's less than that cost of acquisition. You can scale up paid ads. If you're not doing paid ads, it's really tough to grow users just with these random campaigns. So the product needs to be good and or shareable enough that people will like spread it to their friends and it'll grow that way. So I think like what we were able to do was build some of these initial campaigns to get the ball rolling. And then after that, people need to spread it. And I think the fact that the extension does stock alerts, and people love talking about like their problems with the PS5 and how they're frustrated with it. And I guess even if they do get the PS5 with us, like they're going to tell their friends how they got the PS5, makes it a very shareable product. And I think that helped us grow a lot as well. Yeah, and also if you're timely with something, you can get a lot of press coverage as well. I think that's probably the number one thing to press coverage, is just that you're doing something timely that's in the news at the time. So some learnings and just random tips for growth. First thing is use images and video in your campaigns to show people the magic of something. Second thing is understand the landscape of these free channels and only focus on campaigns that actually, or social media platforms that actually have reach. So Reddit and TikTok are really good for reach for pretty much anything, but something like Instagram might not actually be that good for reach. Like if you post every day on Instagram for a month, you might not get anything out of it because Instagram doesn't spread people's content to, like, unless you have a lot of followers, they're not going to spread your content. There are some interesting channels that you can use that wouldn't apply to some people, but would apply to others. So if you're working on something like housing or a student startup that like helps connect new people coming in on campus, like Facebook has a lot of Facebook groups for that. But if you're just trying to use some like useless Facebook groups that don't have a lot of traction or a lot of scam bots, you're just gonna be wasting your time on channels that don't have reach. So focus on channels that will have reach and visibility for what you're posting. The third thing is just don't sound salesy. No one likes being sold to, so try to relate to the audience as much as possible. And then the fourth thing is keep your eyes peeled for interesting marketing strategies. So I use TikTok a lot, and whenever I see something interesting, I add it to a folder and just save it. And when I need to come up with some marketing ideas, I'll kind of go through it and see if there's anything interesting that we could do, like a similar spin on to make our own ads. So that's pretty much it for growth. These are some just miscellaneous tips for UT startups. First thing is network hard. It's really easy to meet a lot of people on campus, and UT has a lot of talented people. Go to a lot of these startup events and talk to people. Find out like what they're working on, what they've worked on in the past, and build these connections so you have someone to go to be a co-founder, like when you do decide to start something. Second thing is make progress fast. So as a college student, it's pretty easy to just not make a lot of progress and not get traction, and then just kind of get lazy to pretty much work on something. And I think the best way to combat that laziness is to just build something where you're able to get either user traction or revenue traction as fast as possible. And once you see those numbers rolling, it's easy to get motivated to keep moving forward. Last thing is to use UT resources. So we have like a lot of stuff that helps startups on campus. First thing is Longhorn Startup. They give you access to like mentors that you probably wouldn't have been able to reach without them. So it's run by the guy who runs Capital Factory, Josh Bear, and he brings in a lot of guest mentors. We were able to talk to actually the CEOs of RetailMeNot and Offers.com. And the Offers.com CEO actually really helped out as we were thinking through our acquisition. So these are some people that you might have not been able to meet otherwise, and Longhorn Startup Lab will help connect you to them. Conversion helps you like work with students on campus who are looking to gain experience with startups. So we work with Conversion, I think, like 2 semesters in a row for this. Genesis is really good for fundraising. So Genesis actually just gives you non-dilutive funding. So they don't even take equity for giving you the funding. It's an amazing resource that can help really bootstrap you without you having to give up any equity or take too much risk on. Blackstone also has similar programs where they give away a lot of grants. So stay on the lookout for some of these Blackstone programs. And then the last thing is just general sympathy from people. Like depending on what industry you're in, if you're reaching out to people as a college student, in some ways they're more likely to respond to you and help you out. So take advantage of that as well. That's pretty much it for my presentation. Happy to answer any questions. Yeah.
Yeah, so super cool, Rithvik, thanks for sharing. One question I had was, so I think now I'm seeing a lot of retailers like Target, maybe Walmart, they have like their own kind of in-stock notifications where it's like, press this if you want to see this item back in stock. So
Right.
was that not existent during the time of, I guess, Octoshop, or have these retailers been picking up on, I guess, that mechanism and started implementing it? How does it affect, I guess, now that you sold it, but how does it affect the current landscape in your opinion?
Right. So I think some of those buttons were there at the time, but they're not going to get you what you need. So their in-stock systems aren't as fast. It's more designed for things that were just out of stock before. I think one thing to keep in mind is to generally not worry about companies moving fast because they won't move fast. So those in-stock buttons, I still don't think they're optimized for what we're doing. So the PS5, like scalpers will come and buy that thing within like 30 seconds of it coming back in stock. And it's similar for a lot of the products we're marketing within. And so, yeah, I don't think like it was kind of a different use case. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think the best market research is just like, depending on how hard something is to make, sometimes it's just better to build it out and test it and just have some like intuition on how things will work. I just like to think of things from that whole like acquisition, retention, monetization. If you can like convince someone that all those 3 things are met, there's nothing else you need, right? At the end of the day, you're trying to make money, but to do that, you need acquisition and retention. If you have some interesting strategy to get users, I would say just go for it. If you can think through all those 3 things. Yeah.
Yeah, for your TikTok especially, but overall your social media marketing, did you use your own platform and kind of build your identity as kind of an entrepreneur before? Is it kind of mixed in with your social life?
Honestly, like with TikTok and Reddit, like those were the big ones for each. You don't really have to have that much of a following. So I think now I got like a ton of followers just because of like that and one of the other posts I made that were just marketing Octoshop. So I'm sure it's helpful, but I haven't really like built that much of an online like social media presence. Yeah.
What were some of the early signs and qualities of people that would make good co-founders?
Yeah. So I think the main thing is just like understanding what they've done in the past. If people have worked on a bunch of like side projects in the past and you've seen them or you've seen like those products are out like in production in the app store or online, and you see it working well, I think that's a good sign to have. Another one, I guess it's a little harder to find, but if people have like built something and have actually gotten traction on it, like users or like some sort of traction, I think like made them. So I guess to summarize, the main thing is just looking at what they've done in the past more than anything. And another thing is to maybe work on like smaller projects with them. So if you have some simple idea for a project instead of like a full out startup, just work with as many people as you can so you know like how they work and if they would be a good fit. Yeah.
So did you find like most marketing was like social media, most of your posts from that, or did you find like other partnerships?
Most of it was social media and just word of mouth. So we did, like I said, I guess like we started some of these campaigns to get the ball rolling, and then like people would just talk about it because it's easy to talk about, but also we try to incentivize it within the extension. So one thing we did was like at some point we split or we added something called priority alerts. So I think that gets you like priority in the queue of when you're getting the notifications. And to get that priority, you need to refer like 1 or 2 people to come use it as well. So we try to do some things like that, but most of it was just social media and then also like PR. So like sometimes we reached out to like news companies to try and get featured. Yeah.
Well, that was gonna be my question. Where was the news articles organic, or what was the process like? Were some of them that you reached out to, and then others organic because of that, or how did that work? What was the process like?
So for InStock, it was really nice. It was super smooth. We didn't have to reach out to anyone. So like we just made some posts on Reddit and people reached out to us because it was super timely, right? So like when 1 or 2 news stations reached out to us initially, like other news stations saw that we were being covered and then more just started to reach out that way. But I think that's just because it's super timely. Like they just had to swap out a story essentially with ours. But later on, it was a lot harder to get people to respond. Like even a month later, even for InStock, it was too late. So another thing is also to like launch really fast if you see something timely. If we didn't launch that week, like we probably wouldn't have gotten any of that news coverage. So yeah, that was organic. And then for Octoshop, initially, I think 1 or 2 of the big ones were organic. But then after that, like we started to just like mass outreach. Like we built like scripts to like run through like email contacts of press and just do some mass outreach. Yeah. I think someone in the back was, yeah. Yeah, sure. So I think it's different for different companies. Like Ibotta, like we kind of wanted to move fast on it. They're really awesome people. We just like the CEO actually reached out to us back I think in August or July. And then we kind of just had some initial negotiations. After we were okay with the deal, we signed like a letter of intent, which basically like you in an acquisition, you sign an LOI with someone saying that you're going to pursue this deal and not look at other opportunities. And then once you do that, you go through like a diligence process. So we went through like diligence for our user metrics, our code, like the scalability of our code, different things like that. And then finally, I think like this was a special case, so we moved really fast. Like some companies, I feel like it could take like many months to just go through this diligence process. But yeah, so it took just, I think like within 2 months, we were able to, basically they were able to give us the okay on the diligence, and then we just signed, and that was pretty much the end of it. And then after that, I guess we worked with them to integrate it into their extension. So I was there for a few months between like September and January, and then some of my other co-founders are still there.
Okay, that's some follow-up questions. Like, what about it? What was special that you guys like? Why did you guys decide to go through with the acquisition versus continuing?
Right. So I think it's generally always going to be the acquirer who like decides the speed. We'd like gone through some other processes before that didn't end up working out, that took a much longer time. So yeah, so it was pretty much their decision. And then the other thing with selling the company, I think it was just I guess it was just a good point for us. It was a good offer. So we weren't actively looking for anyone to acquire us, but like once they reached out, it was just kind of like, I don't know, outweighing the risk of continuing versus taking the deal. So yeah, it was just like more, that's just more of a personal decision. There's not much, like, more emotional than logic there. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, I think I kind of want to stay at Google for a little bit, and then definitely want to get back in this space in a few years. So yeah, I definitely want to work on things in the future. Yeah. Pass fails. COVID pass fails. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think part of it was just COVID pass fails. Things were like slightly slower, easier in some ways online. And also, I mean, with COVID, like there's college stuff, and then also there's like you're quarantined at home. Like there's not much else to do, so there's enough time. Yeah.
So after what specific resources you use throughout your entire startup process, like generating ideas? I know you mentioned like having project social events. As well as like anything like resources you use for the legal financial processes of the acquisition.
Oh, so sorry, what was your question? Like what resources we needed for that stuff?
Yeah, just in general, like from start to finish, I guess.
Yeah, so I guess starting off, you need to like register a company, which you could go through a lawyer, and that probably would be the better option for us to do because things are kind of weird when you're getting acquired. But I just like filled that out myself. So technically, like if you're not sure of your idea or you're not like super confident, you can just go like sign up yourself. Just go to the Texas LLC website, and then you just like fill out a form, and you're like registered as a company. Then after that, I mean, like there's not much legal that you need to do. Maybe like with your co-founders, like having some like agreements there, or if you're bringing someone on, like agreements to give them equity. But I think at the end of the day, like, I don't know, I might be wrong with this, but it's just like if you have something on a piece of paper that like two people sign and it's pretty clear what it says, I think it probably should be fine. So I kind of just like found templates of like or whatever I needed. So if I needed like a contractor agreement or like a co-founder agreement or an agreement to give someone equity, and just had people sign it. And I think it's also different if you go for an LLC versus a C corp. A C corp has a lot of like requirements. I think you need to have like meeting minutes. You need to have like very specific things that you need to do for C corps. But LLCs is a little more like you have like a lot more control of how the business runs. So at the beginning, when you register the company, you also make an operating agreement that kind of lets you set a lot of your own rules. And so once you do that, you can just use templates or find things for whatever contract you need. And then like the acquisition process, we actually did end up using a lawyer. That was probably important to use one with. So yeah, we just got a lawyer to just work with us on like the paperwork for that and making sure the deal terms are good and things like that. But we didn't really like need too much early on. And I think like, I don't know, maybe like moving forward, I probably will end up using some of these resources, but at the time we didn't want to spend money on like legal services are super expensive. And I think like if you really do need legal services, I would say use some of these UT resources like Genesis and Blackstone. Because if there's like funding that you need for things like this, they'll definitely help you out. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the same question, but from a less legal standpoint, how did you kind of decide how much equity each of your co-founders is going to get,
Mhm.
the new engineers you onboarded? How did you decide like what was fair and what kept everyone happy while like making it all add up?
Right. So I think the way we did it was based on like progress made so far. Because I guess if you start off initially, there's a lot of risk to it working or not. So it makes sense to give people more equity, but then once things are proven out more and more, like that number goes down because the risk is less. So that's kind of how we did it. So we just like stair step down. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. I think the first thing is you get some legal protection. So if someone like sues the company, like they're not suing you personally. So that's always like nice to just have at the back of your head, or not have at the back of your head, that risk. And then the other thing is sometimes like you're just going to be forced to do it. If you're just working on an idea, maybe it's fine initially, but sometimes like when you're working with like vendors, they're going to require that you need an LLC. So I think like at some point when we were applying to these affiliate programs, like you need to apply with the business. So we needed like a tax EIN from the business. We needed some like business information. So if you're working with other companies, I think like it becomes a lot more necessary, but in general, it's nice to have that protection and separation. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, we didn't do it at the beginning. So like after like we launched in stock, I think like close to when we were launching Octoshop, we decided to do it. Yeah. Yeah.
When you were starting, like, stock and options, not so associated with starting,
Mhm.
you could just self-fund, then how did you go to that decision? And like, generate or how did you support that?
Right. Yeah. So I think the nice thing about software like companies is that there's not many costs. And like server fees is never going to matter to you initially because you can get credits really easily. So we, through Genesis, we actually applied to the Google Cloud Startup Program, and we got like, I think $100,000 in credit. So like, it's really hard to run out of $100,000. So pretty much you're not going to be paying for server costs for a while. I think the main thing that we really paid for at the beginning was just the legal fees. And we were able to support that with just like revenue from InStock, which was like ads and the donation. So we had like a buy me a coffee link at the top. So if people like got what they needed, they just want to support the devs, like they can click that button and donate to us. So I think we used that. But other than that, there weren't too many costs. Like with that, like with software, it's just really good because you don't have any costs. And if you're building a team in college, like everyone's just working as a team, like you have co-founders, there's not going to be much cost at the beginning.
And when you say like legal fees for stock, what kind of legal fees are those? And then
Yeah.
just add, like, how did you just reach out to people like, hey,
Okay. So the first thing with the legal fees, pretty much the main thing you need is just the company registration, which is I think like $350 on like the Texas LLC website. If you want to do it through a lawyer, I feel like I heard that it was like around 1,000 to get that done through them. So yeah, that was the legal fees. I don't think there was too much else that I can think of. And then for the ads, you don't reach out to people directly, or you could, right? If you have a lot of traction, but you just use like existing ad networks. So Google has like Google like AdSense, and it's just an SDK that you can add to your website, and then you can just place the ad on your website and they'll just fill it for you. So there, it's like pretty, like as long as you get approved, like your site's good enough to get approved, there's not like too much manual work you have to do to get that going. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you ever consider grad school? And if you were, what was like, what did you, when, like, what made you realize that you didn't want to go that route and be like a founder?
Oh, are you like, what's your major?
I'm studying computer science now.
Computer science. Okay. I don't know. I think I didn't really ever consider grad school. Like I think it's mainly like a decision between like going to work at a company or working on startups. As I feel like, I don't know, CS like has a lot of opportunities that you can get already without grad school. I haven't looked into it too much, so I don't know like the full story, but I just felt like, I mean, I could just do stuff without grad school. I think even like if you do grad school, the boost in like what they pay you is actually not even that much. Like I think it's only like a couple thousand. So you have to like pay for another year of grad school. But I think it's really useful if you're trying to do something specialized, right? So if you're interested in like some like really advanced stuff, I think it makes a lot of sense. But for me, I'm more interested in like product and just building things versus like going like deep into something or deep into like AI or something specific. And I think like with work experience, I could just pick that up. So that's why I just never really considered grad school. Mhm. Yeah.
Can I ask something to touch on? What was your decision in deciding to work for a company here?
Mhm.
Like, sticking with startups?
I think one thing is timing. So it ended up working out to where like things ended with Octoshop. So I was able to take this on. Another thing is, I guess, just meeting people. So Google has like really smart people that you can just meet and work with. Working at a company is interesting. Like you can like learn a lot from like processes and things that they do. So I think like a lot of it is just learning and working within a company for a little bit before I move back to startups. Yeah. Yeah.
How did you detach the emotional side from the logic side when you're getting acquired?
I don't know. I guess you don't. It's a pretty emotional decision, I guess. Like you'd have to maybe like the only logic that you could make is I guess thinking of like future growth. So you have to kind of think of like what the risks of moving forward and growing are to get to like an even higher scale um versus like just taking like a cash out. So it's just like you have to think of like what those like risks are and just like what the trade-offs are for you doing that. I had also interned at Google, so I had this offer lined up. So it was also like a bunch of us also had offers lined up. So it was just like a good time and it was a good offer. But yeah, I guess it's a tough decision to make. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
What about those like made it not work out?
So some of them were at a similar time. So we just ended up like going with Ibotta because we thought that they were a good fit and could move our stuff forward. Um, like it was just a little bit slow. Like some of the other stuff, like it would have taken like a lot longer. So we just ended up signing an LOI with Ibotta. But some of the ones in the past, just like you'll go through diligence and then you'll realize that maybe it's not a good fit or maybe they want to delay it to some future date. Or maybe like the deal isn't good enough for you, right? So like some of them, like the deal just wasn't good enough. Or other ones like the deal just ended up falling through. So I guess like don't like is it hatch your or don't I don't know the saying like did like I guess like always expect something to go wrong. Like don't like think something is a surefire thing until like the deal's signed. Yeah. Don't count your eggs before they hatch. Yeah.
And for all of the for all of the previous ones, like were they the ones you reached out to, or did you guys like try to get acquired and reach out?
No, they just reached out to us. So I think the only thing you can I think there's maybe other ways to get acquired, but like the best thing to do if you're not actively looking is to just put yourself out there to people who would be interested. So I have a feeling a lot of these guys reached out to us because the TikTok post, like the $1 million idea for an invention thing got spread within like VC circles. So a lot of VCs had reached out to us in the past. So just like being known or like yeah, people knowing that you're doing something and it's working out, I think like having that presence on the side of like people who would be interested in acquiring or like VCs, I think is like probably the best way to put yourself out there. But we didn't like manually do any outreach for it. Yeah, so the only thing we did was the like Longhorn Startup Lab. Other than that, and pretty much like all the things on the list that I talked about is all we did. So we didn't really raise any money, like no dilutive like funding. Yeah. I think someone there was raising. Yeah. Mhm.
speaking of like things going bad, what has been like the most chaotic or like the worst week you've had at the start of so walk us through that?
Yeah, I would say probably the worst week was like when I think we were growing and we just had too many requests to handle, and like everyone was getting messed up. So like you can think it's a nice problem to have, but also like if everyone else is getting affected by it, then you're just gonna lose everyone, right? So that week, like I think there were just too many requests being made, like things were crashing, things were like slow and lagging out. And I mean, that was just a grind. I guess you just have to like get to the computer and everyone just needs to grind to figure out what's wrong and like spend the time to fix it. But yeah, like that was probably the worst week, was just like when things started breaking and like we're afraid people would uninstall, which I think a lot of people did at the time.
Speaking of which, since like most of you guys were college students at the time, was it difficult to like have time? Like I guess like this year for like speak, but like how did you guys like plan time to like work on the startup and like just kind of manage your time that way? All these together to work on this particular problem when it happened.
Oh, like when the problem happened, I think everyone just like cares enough about it to just come in and like just grind it out. Like our general communication was all through like Discord, which is really good because you have like the voice channels. So you just like talk through Discord, and then like if something comes up, you like hop in a voice channel and solve it together. So yeah, I think it was just like everyone was self-motivated enough to just, when there's something wrong, like everyone tries to like figure out the problem. Yeah. And then they just
Oh yeah, my question. Oh yeah, for Google Cloud for startups, like we actually applied as well, but they said you have to be funded. How do y'all kind of bypass that?
So Genesis will let you bypass that sometimes if you get through Genesis. I guess you get funded through Genesis, you could. Another thing, I'm not sure of it yet, but if you get through like a good bank, like Silicon Valley Bank or Mercury, you can get credits through that too. So yeah, so I think you just have to be a part of the bank. They need to approve you for some stuff, but that'll give you that like checkbox. Yeah. And I think it's the same. I think both Google Cloud and AWS have like up to 100,000. So both should work. Yeah.
I don't know how much I missed, but in terms of the timeline for how quickly y'all were able to get the first version out, like what was that looking like in terms of like launching and then like I guess doing your MVP? Like how long did that take you?
So the in-stock website MVP was under a week. So we just had to get it done or nothing would have happened. Because I think like the whole PR thing I was talking about, we tried later again, like 3 weeks later. People didn't want to cover us as much anymore. Like you just, so we just, yeah, I mean, the code was really bad. It was like terrible code, but it worked. And then we just had to get something working and launched. Then after that, I think we like refactored it and spent time rewriting it. But
And
yeah.
at the very beginning, did you have a founding team or did people join as you started gaining traction? What was the like I guess team building process like from the very beginning?
Yeah, so I initially like started with a co-founder. So started with Darshan, and then like over time more people came on like as we grew. Yeah.
How do you determine to give equity or I guess cash incentives when people start joining the team?
I guess it depends how much money you have, right?
I guess for you, for InStock, how was it? Or like for Shop, how did you make those decisions?
Those all just like co-founders, like with yeah.
without equity.
Yeah.
Sorry for the question, Sam.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. Yeah, yeah,
So we do
yeah.
have food. I mean, does anybody have any other questions for Rico?
Yeah.
I have a question. The topic when you were like running teams, you started with one other person. So
Mhm.
can you walk me through that decision of like, did you make the decision, oh, I want to bring more people on? Did people reach out to you? And then if people reached out to you, how was your decision like this person?
Yeah, so I guess Darshan was there like from day one. I had the idea and I just like called him, or I just called him up and asked him if he's interested in doing it. Again, I know Darshan's like a monster and he'll do anything super quickly. So like I just knew that it would probably end up working out. So we just worked on it over the weekend, got it launched. So I reached out to Darshan, but he was there like day one, like before we even started.
Oh, I meant like when you were expanding your team.
Oh, expanding the team.
You like, oh, we need more people.
Yeah.
People reaching out to you.
Yeah, I think it was mostly just that we needed more people. So I'd worked with Sriram actually on Apply, so a startup in the past. So I'd worked with him before. I know he's amazing too. So I just like reached out to him, asked if he's interested, and then I think yeah, like one of our designers was also part of Apply, so I reached out to them, and then one of the other guys was Sriram's friend from high school, and he's worked with him in the past, so he knows how he works. So he's also amazing, and we added him on like that. And then the last one actually, like we found Joy through Conversion. So Joy was like part of the Conversion team working with us to build things out, and she was a designer, and she was amazing. So we just like got her on after the Conversion program was over. Yeah.
As someone who can also code, how much coding did you find yourself doing, especially I guess in the early stages? Did you actually actively hands-on build them if you with Darshan, or did you do most of that work? Like, what was your role starting off, I guess?
I guess I was more involved like with code at the very beginning with InStock, but then after that, I like not that much anymore. So I shifted to more of just like product and marketing, because I think like if you get into the weeds of like building something and like continuing to code it, like you might lose sight of like the marketing and like the bigger picture. So I just pretty much primarily focused on like anything that wasn't dev. So like maybe some of the legal stuff, maybe the like marketing, finding new people, coming up with those contracts, like product, like working with these affiliate programs to get new people on board, like optimizing monetization and things like that. Yeah.
To get the affiliate links, did you have like people of contact at these big retailers like Walmart, Target, or like how was or is it more of like you could just get it just through just a link? How does that really work in terms of getting a cut of like these huge retailers?
Yeah, so it like I think it's good. It's in a good place right now to where there's companies like Skimlinks and VigLink that aggregate all these affiliate programs. So you just need to sign up through them and get the approval once, and then you can get all their, but they take a cut, right? So like eventually, I guess if you're able to get those direct partnerships, it's better. But yeah, to start off, like you need to get approved by one of these aggregators and you can get running. Yeah.
Any other questions for Liquid?
Yeah. I would say maybe mainly like the whole like arms thing, like to actually think through all those pieces when you're working on something. And I think it's fine to just have like one thing. Like I only knew like InStock would be good for acquisition. I don't know if it's good for anything else. But maybe like time boxing to where like in like a month or 2 months, you should be able to kind of answer all those questions of like how you're going to acquire people, why are they going to stick around and come use it regularly? How are you actually going to make money from them? And is this like a scalable idea? So thinking through those things. And also the other thing is probably just moving fast, because again, it's really easy to just like lose interest if nothing's happening. And if you're able to move fast and things are like, you're actually seeing results, you can either like continue and you'll be motivated to move forward, or you can fail fast and realize like this isn't going to work out. So just like moving fast, I think that might actually be the biggest one. Yeah.
If you had to redo this journey over again, is there anything you would change?
I don't know. I guess like it's hard to think about that. I mean, if things worked out, like don't worry about like what to change. Yeah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Yeah, there's probably a lot of stuff we could have done better. Yeah.
It turned out fine, so.
Yeah.
Could you share the slide deck with us after?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I can make sure.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
All right, any other questions before we break off to get lunch?
Yeah, no, I've been
All right, everyone, we're ready to get started. How's everyone doing today? How was the first workshop? Thumbs up, thumbs down. What do y'all think? Oh, well, you didn't show up. You don't have a right to say anything. All right, so yeah, before we get started, just a bit of context for this workshop. So what the first workshop primarily served us was like a case study showing like a UT student, a Longhorn, can be successful on campus and what kind of startups we can make, what kind of processes we go through, what kind of struggles we go through. And Ritvik was like a prime example of that. He's like my role model. I want to be like that one day. But a big question is, how do I start, right? And that's what this is about. So let's get right into it. So imagine you are Ritvik, right? And you saw that pain point, like, okay, lots of things are running out of stock. Toilet paper is going out like that. How do we create a product that will let people know where they can get toilet paper, right? You got the idea, but how do you actually reach people and tell them how to solve that problem, right? And the answer to that, at least for Ritvik and almost every problem I can think of personally, is leveraging the internet. And that is developing a product. And one thing that's really nice about that is you just need to know how to code. You just need a laptop, type some lines of code out, deploy it, and you automatically got access to millions of people who can use it. The problem is code makes no sense. Like you look at that, it's gibberish. It can get really frustrating. You see errors happen half the time and half the time it works. There's a lot of variability. So it's pretty scary to get started, especially if you've never coded before. So just a show of hands, how many of y'all have coded before? All right, that's pretty solid, respect. But this workshop is designed for people who have zero coding experience, but it will be easier to follow if you have in the past. So let's get right into it. So like Ritvik said, right now, change makers are living the dream. Entry costs to the industry are super low. He was able to get like $10,000 of free credits just like that by applying to Google's, or 100K, even better, just by applying to Google's startup accelerator. And these cloud credits are really what drive innovation for us students, because you can write some code and deploy it, and Google basically handles all of the servers, all of the networking. So you can get millions of users and they just automatically scale up. You don't have to worry about that. And that's why life is so easy for us. And that phenomenon is known as cloud computing. If you see that buzzword thrown around, it's basically the idea that I can code something on my laptop, deploy it, and some other company, whether it's Amazon, Google, Microsoft, will handle all the specifics of getting it to the internet and making sure that there's enough traffic going to these websites whenever people do go there. And not only that, information is everywhere. Like with the internet, all of us can just pull out our phone, pull out our laptop, access a new URL. Like at the end of this workshop, no problems happen, cross your fingers. We will be able to see a URL live and that anyone in the world can access. And third of all, Ritvik was really able to leverage social media. Like we're at an age where we can reach so many people who can relate to us by targeting the right social media channels. So as a student, this is the dream. Imagine like 30, 40 years ago, if we wanted to do startup, it likely would have to be some sort of hardware startup where we build a product, and just reaching out to everyone would require a lot of work, especially if you're trying to reach out to people outside of your school. So we're really lucky right now. That's a consensus. But starting your first project can be confusing and overwhelming just because there's almost like over 50 programming languages. You don't know which one to use. All of them look like gibberish. And also, whenever you're starting out, like last night, I was creating a demo project to go with y'all. I got at least 20, 30 errors, and you just got to be patient, get through them. And that can be overwhelming, but patience is the name of the game in this, honestly. So step one is find a problem. Whatever you're doing, when you want to learn how to code, I think it's really important to find something you care about personally, because that's what drives you to solve those errors and really put your head to the table and work. So problems are all around us, right? The first problem I personally solved as a developer was the idea of stress. So I went to boarding school actually for high school called TAMS. Rebraj actually went there as well. But basically, we were 15, 16, 17, or not 15, sorry. We were like 16, 17, 18-year-olds living in college alone and taking some pretty hard classes. So with the stresses around us, I realized the seniors got some really nice insights on how they can really deal with those stresses, but lots of juniors were struggling. So I made a platform that literally all it did was take your preferences and match you to a mentor. Very simple website, but it was able to create a lot of impact. And a lot of things on the internet can be pretty simple. And that's what we kind of want to highlight over here. But whatever it is, problems are all around us. You just need to turn on that filter in your head that identifies, oh, this sucks. What is bad about it? What's the root cause and how can I solve it? So the first thing is to learn more about your problem. That can be done just by talking to the people facing the problem. It could even be yourself. So just reflecting what is really going on and really getting into the root cause. I remember my management teacher would really emphasize, get to the root cause, get to the root cause. And what does that mean? So basically what you have to do is take a problem, see all of the things that may have caused that problem, and keep drawing this sort of tree and pick one aspect of that tree that you want to solve. Because every problem stems from another problem, which stems from another problem. Solve the one that you think you're most passionate about and you think can create the most impact. Yeah, and step 3, just build it out. With this GIF, you can see it could be a pretty tedious process to put every single brick on top, and that's what coding is like. It's not fast, it's not easy, but after you put in the focus, you can build something out really nice. And sometimes it is tedious. A lot of it is copying code you've already written and just reorganizing it. So it's really a focus game. But step 4, once you build something out, the big thing is just testing it out with the people who face the problem in the first place, getting some feedback, and using that feedback to iterate upon your project. So a lot of this might seem like common sense because it is. We're all human beings, we understand each other, and we want to solve each other's problems. So how do you do that best? By asking them what's actually going wrong. But surprisingly in industry, this is what they struggle a lot with, especially big companies. They think they know what their user wants, but they rarely actually go and ask them. So that's one thing as students we really have an advantage to do is we're surrounded by 50K students. You can just walk up to one, and it's a little bit weird sometimes, but just break the ice and then understand what they're really going through. And then from there on out, you can really decide how to target it, and boom, you have a user right there and then. So now here's the more technical question. How do you design these systems that can scale up to be used by more than millions of people? Obviously not at the very start, but eventually that is the main goal, right? Depending on your problem, I guess. But let's talk about software as a service because this is the primary model that I'm going to be talking about. Software as a service is, you can think about it as something more complicated, like there's a formal definition, but really it's any type of software that takes advantage of the internet and provides you some sort of service. So in the next slide, I feel like I shouldn't be walking back and forth so much. Okay, these are some examples of SaaS companies. Literally almost every website you can think of is providing some sort of service at the end of the day. Like for example, Slack is providing you a platform to talk to people who you're working with. Spotify is providing you a platform to identify what kind of music you really like and give it to you at the right time. So these are all providing services through software. And at the end of the day, you could build any of these, or at least most of these, just by yourself, by coding it out and deploying it through some cloud provider. Now, obviously, it's not that easy to make these, and they require teams of thousands and thousands of people, but it always does start out with 1 or 2 people just coding it out in a garage sometimes. So like Ritvik said, when you're building SaaS products, you used to need really expensive servers, huge data centers, crazy CPUs. With cloud computing, Google, Amazon, Microsoft have kind of taken that away from us, so we don't have to worry about that. You can enter this industry with $0 and make something that anyone can use, and even start making some money, whether you're charging through ads, making them pay for a subscription model, or whatever you really want. And speaking of the subscription model, I'm just going to gloss over these, but ARR is what most companies use to make their money. So like Spotify charges a monthly subscription. Netflix also charges a monthly subscription. So subscription models are really nice ways to make money versus like if you're a Walmart, it's hard to predict demand. But once you've got someone in a subscription model, it's almost like easy money at that point. Your goal is just to maximize ACV, which is your new customers, and minimize churn, the people leaving. And once again, it's a lot of common sense in terms of doing both of those. You minimize churn by making your product as good as possible. The user experience is nice, it's not crashing, and your price is justified for the user. And ACV is mainly through marketing. You reach out, whether it's TikTok like Ritvik did, or just reaching out to people who you think could use your product. And of course, building out new features that people will like. So I kind of already talked about this. I'm going to speed through this because I want to get to the actual building as soon as possible. But this is the architecture of a web application. So here we are on the left as users, we're interacting with the browser. So like Tejas right there is on some sort of website right now, typing stuff out and using his mouse. So those are the inputs, and those inputs interact with what is called a front end. So whenever you go to a website, you'll see like all these text, images, clickable items. That's all called the user interface or UI. And as a core, it's all called the front end. And it's comprised of 3 programming languages. Just memorize these. HTML, think of that as like a Word doc almost, which has all of the headings, all of the paragraphs, all of the buttons. It's just effectively structuring your website into a document. CSS, think of it as like the coloring options, the different font sizes. It's adding style to that structure of the website. So whenever you see different animations, different colors, different fonts, that's all CSS. And whenever you see something moving, it's JavaScript. So this could be like whenever you click on an item and it saves it for you, shows you some new information below, that's all being rendered by JavaScript. So with just HTML, CSS, you'd effectively have a static website, which is what they call it, which doesn't move. You can't interact with it. You can't save any information. So something like a personal website or like a restaurant menu could be completely static. You don't need JavaScript. But if you're taking in information, doing stuff with users' inputs a lot, then typically you do need some JavaScript with it. So that's the front end. One thing that's interesting about the front end is any user can see your code actually. If you wanted, you can copy and paste Google source code for the website and build your own mini Google, at least from an appearance perspective. So you want stuff on your front end to be things you don't care about sharing with your user because they can just inspect the element, which I'm sure some of y'all have done, and see all of the contents right there. That's where the backend comes into play. This could also be known as a web server, but it's comprised of file systems. So just like your computer has a file system that stores files, it stores relevant info like images or even documents if you're making an upload website or literally anything, honestly. And it's storing it in a file server. And whenever you hear the word server, just think of a more industrial grade laptop. It could be a laptop, but that just wouldn't be good because it doesn't have the processing power or the storage to be effective. And then there's app logic. So that's very similar to the JavaScript in the front end. In fact, you can even use JavaScript for the back end, but this sort of logic is what you want to be private. This is where your real value comes out. So typically with most websites, you're providing some sort of information that the user types in or clicks on, and that information is sent to the app logic. And over there, you typically either do some math, do some processing with some other database that you already have stored, but it should have your unique value proposition that differentiates you from other websites, because that's the part that no one can really access. And it's also not dependent on what laptop people are using. So the front end, it's all rendered. If you have a really old laptop, it could be really slow, really glitchy. But whenever you click that button and it's sent to the back end, it's being all done in a different computer. So if you want to do something pretty intensive, do it in your back end as well. And finally, there's a database aspect of that. That's saving all information. So if you're like an Uber driver, your driver's license, your past drive history, all of that will be stored in a database for Uber and away from users, because we don't want users to be able to see that. We want it to be as far away as possible. So that's the brief architecture. I'm going to pause here because this is where things get a bit confusing. Yeah, what's up? Yeah, so C++, C goes in app logic. So just for everyone, those are actually one of the first 2 programming languages that really got widely used by people. They're pretty complicated and really, you can get a lot of headaches working with them because they aren't as user-friendly, but they're also the fastest languages because they're so close to zeros and ones that our computers use. And that's why it's used in backends, because it's speed. And at the end of the day, a little bit of C++ is actually making it to the front end through something called WebAssembly. So if you ever use Figma, that's actually coded in C++, but that's a pretty new technology. It's where they basically compile C++ into zeros and ones that the browser can understand. Before that, only JavaScript could do that, but it's a new technology that's really up and coming if you are a C++ developer. Now, one thing I really want to highlight here is these 2 arrows, request and response. So like I said, your front end sends data to your server, and your server sends data to your front end. What that's called is typically a request and response architecture, also known as APIs. And that's the internet layer that sends information from one side to the other and back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I'll show you an example of a few requests being made later on. But just know that APIs or application protocol interfaces are how front ends talk to back ends. And it's really used all over industry. In fact, one of the biggest valued companies, Stripe, made most of its money by making an API that lets you basically host payments on your platform. So this is some pretty powerful stuff, and people have made billions of dollars through this relatively, now some would say, simple architecture. But let's get a little bit more deep into how it actually works. So you have a web browser, right? Whenever you go to a URL, like pressdm.com here, it goes to something called the domain name service, or DNS. So whenever you go there, it actually returns an IP address. Every computer, including mine, yours, has an IP address, and that's basically its identity in the internet. There's some more intricacies with that with the MAC address and stuff, but just think of it simply as each computer has an IP address, and you have a few ports. And whenever you go to a website, it tells you what IP address and what port to connect to, and your browser effectively goes through the internet and connects to that IP address, which is another computer. Once you've connected to that basically computer, you can do responses and requests. So first thing you always request is give me the UI of the website, and then renders for the user. Then if you click a few buttons, submit a few forms, it requests more information and sends it over, saves it to some sort of database or backend like we mentioned here. But yeah, that's the gist of it. I'm gonna stop again. Any questions, concerns, or does this all kind of make sense? Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, good. So far, not too confusing. So let's do a, oh, guess I need to end this show for now. Let's do a quick demo. So suppose we go to my canvas, daily cause of stress. Hey, so one thing that's interesting, suppose we want to see the UI. I kind of mentioned that you can copy anyone's UI just by hitting inspect element. So boom, right here, what you see is all of their HTML code. And you can specifically see what the code for each element is. So if you really want to copy, like, how did they make this? It's a button. And you can learn more about like what content is inside. And it has the actual content, Texas Sustainability Innovation Challenge. So the way HTML works is it's effectively tags, and I'll go more into this, that refer to different types. So they could be paragraphs, buttons, links. It's a few set of standardized items that you see all across the internet. And one thing that's pretty cool is suppose like there's this assignment I have due at 11 p.m. I don't think I'll finish it in time. Let me make it due at 4 a.m. And boom, the assignment's due date is changed. Not actually, obviously. If you refresh the page, it'll actually come back because that stuff is stored in the back end. If it was stored in the front end, they would be screwed. We would be able to inspect, element our way out of a lot of assignments, which is why security matters quite a bit. But Canvas devs are pretty smart. I'm no match for them. But yeah, that's kind of the gist. You can see the HTML code here. But one thing that's over here is the CSS. So this is the styles. So suppose we want to make this really big. We can say like font size equals to 1000 pixels and boom, it becomes very big. And you can change other things as well, like the font family. We can make it a bit fancier as well. And anything else like the color, we can make it red. Things like that. CSS, like I said before, is a styling layer of web development. HTML is laying out each element, and JavaScript is actually doing actions whenever we click or interact with any part of the interface effectively. So now that we've kind of done a quick demo here, I'll also show you this network tab. So let's go to fetch XHR. So these are all API calls. So each API is effectively a URL. It's hosted on it. Oh yeah, what's up?
Going back to like the HTML.
Yeah.
So for example, like where thing when you like hold all this data from different websites, was it like you run into like the HTML filters and thousands of things. I don't like web scraping.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't. Disclaimer: I don't know how Rithley did it. You might have done some magic, but if I were doing it, I would use web scraping. So what web scraping is it's literally like inspect elementing each website, kind of diving through the code of HTML, finding what you want. So you could scrape, for example, for all of my classes by creating a bot that first of all clicks on courses, then gets the HTML, and just control F's effectively each of the courses, extracts that data, saves it in some sort of database, and sends it over. So yeah, and web scraping, I don't know about if you call this web scraping, but inspect element can be pretty nice if you have a lot of information on a web page and you just want to be able to copy and paste it, but it's organized in a really weird format. You could reformat it yourself in a way that you want just by using inspect element. I use it on a daily basis and it comes in really clutch for me personally. But this is more of the connection to the front end and back end. So the front end is now requesting dashboard cards. That's kind of what you're seeing here in the front. And it's using something called a get request. So that means it's getting information from the back end. And this is the IP address that it's effectively getting it from. And we can see the response. It's showing all of these different cards, but it's shown in a very different type of data. So typically the data is sent between back and forth from the front end and back end through something called JSON. It's just a way of organizing data. So you would have like a key, which might be like a name and a value. So the key for me would be name, and the actual name would be Tejas Mehta. And it would just send that over. And you can do that for all sorts of data. And that's literally how most of the internet is built. It's just a set of values being sent from one place to another. And people are paid over $200,000 just to do that right out of college, which is insane, but it's pretty awesome for us. Yeah, so that's how APIs work. Does anyone have any questions regarding HTML, CSS, APIs, backend, anything so far? Because I threw a lot of buzzwords. What's up?
Sounds like CSS. Like, what is
Yeah. Yeah, so CSS was the stuff that added here. It's what added the style. So this is effectively a different doc. You could change different things here and it changes the way the UI looks. And this is just basic stuff. You could also do fancy things like animations. I'm just gonna plug my website here, but see like how I got things sliding all over the place, things like that. That's all CSS. So getting things to move around pretty in a cool way is a lot of CSS as well. With that being said, yeah, go for it. Yeah. That's beautifully said. So except servers could be your own laptop. So if you're the viewer, the front end will be your server. It's gonna have an IP address and it's gonna be requesting information from another server. And like you said, it's just sending values back and forth. Why it's like has its own buzzword and stuff is because it's very standardized. Like if you want to make an API request, you'll have things called headers, things called values, data, lots of different things, just so everyone can send a back and forth information in a standardized way so you can build stuff in the future. A lot of things in CS are just setting standards so everyone adheres to them and you can get stuff done in that way. But like he said, it's just sending information from here to there. Think of it as like a mailman almost. The API is just sending information from one address to another. You have to put in the post stamp, you have to put in the address. It's very standardized. Just like that, the API is super standardized. So I guess we can talk a little bit about backend, but otherwise I think we'll get started on the demo. These are just some of the most popular languages. I highly recommend learning Python first if you aren't too technical yet. But if you want to really get deep, I recommend learning Java first because it teaches you a lot of fundamentals of CS. But if you want to start building fast, Python's really good. And for web development specifically, JavaScript is the best language to learn because it's really literally run on JavaScript, as you saw before. Yeah, we'll just get right into the demo. So, okay, I have an idea. I want to get started building. I have like an empty document. How do I start coding? That's everyone's first question when they haven't built anything yet. So let's get right into it. First thing you have to do is download the IDE. So I use PyCharm. And this basically is where you can code your information. It makes it easier to run different files. You don't need this to run files. You can use something called the terminal in Macs or command line in Windows, but this just makes your life a lot easier. So let's call this Entrepreneurshop demo. And I'm going to teach y'all a framework called Flask. What's beautiful about Flask is it runs on Python in the backend. So it's a very easy language to learn. It's very lightweight. It's not the most powerful, but it's perfect for getting stuff just launched. So what you have to do is click Flask here. There's going to be a few settings. So I'm going to pick like the version. The virtual environment is just creating its own shell, so things are saved correctly. And yeah, that's it. All you have to do is click create, and I'm going to open in a new window. Cool. And this part always takes a bit of time. It's really good to have a hobby outside of your computer whenever you're learning coding, because half the time you're just staring at the screen, waiting for things to run, waiting for things to build. I personally like playing the guitar, but yeah, definitely find something to do while it's running. But this one was pretty fast. Let's just hit run right here. And boom. So what's beautiful about Flask is, let's see what it actually did when we started. At the end of the day, these are just text files. You just tell them a file type and it tells the computer how to run them, but it literally only created one file, app.py. And what we're doing here is we're importing Flask so we can use it. We're initializing the app and we have an initial root. So ignore these. This is just boilerplate. This is where the core meat of the product is. app.root/def hello world return hello world. So this is basically saying if you go to this route and the backslash with nothing after it just means you're going to the home page with nothing after it, then it's going to run this function. And this function is going to return hello world. So let's go here. It's running on 127.0.0.1 at port 5000. So like I said, this is an IP address, but if you use this specific one, it's localhost. So no one can access this IP address. That would be a bit dangerous. This is purely for use of my computer to consume right now. So we go here, boom, hello world. If I go to a route that's like not defined, it says not found. But specifically, this backslash here has been defined. And now if we want to create a separate route right here, like Kevin, for example, then we can actually return we can return a different output for that route specifically. So this is how you create different pages in Flask. And if we do this here, we still have hello world here. And over here, if we do Kevin, hello Kevin. So see how this kind of works? We specify what the route is here, and we tell us what to do once you enter this route here. Okay, any questions so far? Or is this all pretty clear? So what's awesome is I literally spent 2 minutes and I already have somewhat of a working website. Obviously, it doesn't look too pretty, so let's work on that. So if you want to add HTML, CSS, JavaScript, the first step is to add HTML always, and we'll add it in this templates folder. So let's create a file called home.html. And whatever I do, my favorite website for learning web development is W3 Schools. You'll always have to Google stuff, and this is one industry where it's fine to Google stuff. You aren't being tested. You have open internet tests literally every day. Think about it like that. But you have full access, and I always say W3 Schools HTML starter. And I go to this basic examples one and copy this code. And boom, you have the structure of a very simple HTML website. So let's look here. This is doc type HTML. So this is saying like, okay, this is a HTML file. It's just telling the computer that this is the start of HTML. This is the end. So this is something you should be pretty observant about is whenever you are working with HTML, you start out with anything that has 2 carets like that, a tag name, and whenever you want to close that tag, it's going to be the same carets, but you put a slash here, and it ends with a tag name. And everything inside of here will be effectively encapsulated within that tag. So we can see that phenomenon here. HTML opens here, closes here. The H1 opens here, closes here. P opens here, closes here. So this is saying apply all the transformations attributes of a H1 to everything inside of it. And you can layer stuff up, and I'll show you more about that later, but let's just do that right now. So if we want this home to HTML to show up, rather than returning a string, I'm going to return render template home.html. And whenever you get these like red squiggly lines, that means you have an error. Typically, what you can do with the IDE, which is super nice, is you hover over it and it tells you why it's wrong. It says unresolved reference render template. And it typically tells you kind of how to fix it as well. So right here, I can just import render template. I didn't import it. So it told me that was wrong, but now it should be right. So hopefully I remember Flask enough to where this will work. So if we go here, Kevin is unchanged. It's still going to return hello, Kevin. But if we go to our home page, boom, my first heading, my first paragraph. If we inspect here, we can actually look at our elements. And this is, as you can see, this is exactly the code we wrote, right? It looks familiar. So be careful. Whatever you write here, everyone can see by inspect elementing. I'm going to do a quick pause here for questions. Everyone good so far? All right. What's the next step after adding HTML typically?
CSS.
Yes, sir. So we add styling. So what I like to do is I like to use this kind of Chrome developer console to add styles here as we go, because I can see it live. Otherwise, you have to keep running, rerunning, running. And the problem is right now we have a really light website. But if you start adding a lot of code, sometimes starting up the website will take a few minutes. So it's better to just do it here. So everyone just kind of shout out, how can we make this website look a bit better? Okay, centered heading. How do you do that? You do text align center. Boom. What else? Yeah, so a background color of what? Like, no, like the background color of the whole page or just the heading? Okay, so if we want to modify the whole page, we go to the body and we say background color blue. Sorry, I don't know how to spell. Boom. I don't know if this is an upgrade, but it's something. Any other like small things y'all are curious about modifying? Because CSS is huge. I don't even know 10% of it. But yeah, anything y'all are curious about? Otherwise, we'll actually add it. A logo. So images. So that's actually one thing interesting is images fall under HTML. So let's add it through our HTML file first. Now, one thing to note, if you do these changes, so many times I've made it look really nice. I forgot to copy and paste it and it gets refreshed and boom, I lost everything. So you have to be careful there because it does not save locally. Always make sure that you're copying and pasting your content back here because this is the true source of code that's not being changed. So like you said, let's add a logo, which is going to come through an image tag at the end of the day. So what kind of logos do you like? A meme, a GIF. Okay, awesome. So let's look at a meme GIF. All right. Aryan's hard at work, so this is for him. So every image tag effectively has a source that's required. And we can just copy and paste any internet link and we should be able to see it. So let's just rerun it. Hope this works and refresh and boom, we got a meme right here. And one thing that's interesting is this is kind of like an API call. It's calling the URL that I put in, asking it for the image information and displaying it. And we can do things to this image as well. If we want to make it look a bit different, we can add a border radius, I think, I hope so. Yeah, so we can round it a bit. We can make it a bit smaller by making like 10%. We can also rotate this. So one of my favorite things is a transform. And let's just say rotate Z. So with this, you can also like rotate it in circles, do whatever you want. CSS is such a simple language, like you see. I'm just thinking about it in English, typing it out, and it's happening right here. And you can do almost any visual changes you want. But surprisingly, yeah, what's up? Exactly. That's actually interesting. So what do you think is the difference between hosting your own website and
It's like the same thing, right? We're still making our tests to try to prove. Okay,
yeah. So what's interesting, so Samuel raised up a really good point. So right now, what it looks like is we're creating an API, and that's returning our HTML file, right? But effectively, that's what every website does. Whenever you go to a URL, it's making a GET request with that URL, and the output isn't like specific information. The output is literally these tags that we wrote: the body, the H1, the P, the image, the CSS, and it's one big API call. So that's every website. So yeah, that's a good point. All right, so let's actually add some CSS. How do we add it? I sometimes forget. I have a cheat sheet here. Let's see. So what you have to do here is add this line to your HTML that tells you where to find the CSS. And you do this all within a header tag. So right here, the biggest thing is you have to change this to static. It's always going to be static because we have this directory here, and we have to change this to the name of the CSS file we made. So let's do this here. Let's create a folder here called styles, because it says styles over here. And let's create a file here called main.css. And boom. Now let's teach you how to do these changes. Over here, it's easy. You click this pointer and tell you what you want to change the style, right? It's not that easy in code because there's no pointer where you can point at things. So how do you point at things? There's multiple ways you can go about it. So suppose we add several headers, right? H1, my second heading. Let's see. Okay, so see how all H1s kind of look the same? That's because they actually have their styles here. So if you look here, all H1s have display block, font size 2am, have all this font weight to be bold. It has a few predefined set of styles, but we can change that. We aren't limited to their definition of H1. We can say H1 here and say, hey, I want my H1s to be red. And let's hope this works. And boom, notice how it changed not just this first one, but the second one, because they're both H1s. Now, one other thing you want to do is suppose I only wanted to like change this specific first H1. So then you can add an ID to it and say first heading, right? So this is basically giving that pointer saying, if we reference this idea, we can change the specific heading. So let's do that here. And what you do is you put a hashtag and then you put first heading here. And then we can say we want this one to be much bigger than the other one. So see how it changed only the first one, not the second one? It's because we put that ID and specifically reference that ID. Now, what if we want to do like a set of items, but not specifically based off of their tag name, but all of them? So we can create a class then. So this is called a class. And let's just create a class here. And we'll call it center. Because we want to center everything. And let's add it to our image too, just for fun. Actually, no, we won't add it to our image. Sorry, the Zoom tab is covering. Okay. Now, if you want to access a class, use a dot. So there's only three things. Put nothing, put a hashtag, or put a dot. And we can do dot center, text align center. And boom, let's run this. And everything here is centered based off of that class. And we can see this here too. It has the class written down. And that's basically pretty much all I'm going to cover on CSS. Any questions or any requests for more stuff to cover? Should we move on? That's our question. Yeah.
So like for the GIF people on the screen, so essentially we're using like the GIF for that website, and that's like the API requested on the back end, requesting that GIF website.
Yeah.
So what if you're like afraid that let's say like GIF is different? feel like somehow like that, like website, the other person talked about.
Yeah, that's an amazing question, actually. It raises an important point. Whenever you're defending, whenever you're depending on things that are outside sources, there's always a risk something will go down. And that's something scary about web development is if you're using a package that got a security vulnerability, you can get hacked. So many companies use this one library. All it was used for was logging, like saying, okay, I've reached this line of code, or this many users have entered my website. A very naive use case, right? But that one library allowed so many companies to get hacked because they had no security vulnerability. So whatever your library's security vulnerabilities are, it may not seem like your problem, but if you're using them, it becomes your problem. You gotta be careful. And sometimes downloading things is good. So the pros are you're more secure. It should be faster to load because it's all hosted in the same place. But you have to pay for storage. Like you need to save it on your website. And whatever server you're hosting your website on, if you have like thousands of images, you'll run out of space. But you can pay more if you want. But that's definitely a possibility. I just did this because it's faster. Okay, the next thing is let's talk a little bit about JavaScript. Where are we? Okay, here we are. Any questions before we move on? Yeah, Tejas.
Okay, so if we look at this code, it looks relatively simple, but
Yeah.
when we inspect element, it looks really complicated. Why is that?
Oh, does it? I thought it was the exact same. Let's take a
Or
deeper.
like not this code, but if you go to some random website,
Oh.
inspect element, it just looks like gibberish to me.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna like sit down and read all that. So how do you write it? Why is our code so clean, but what makes that code so complicated?
Okay, low key. I'm not 100% sure on this answer because whatever work I do, like in my internships, their code is also super long. And sometimes I think for what, right? Part of it, yeah, no, like you have a point. And it comes to three things mainly. Whenever you're changing old code, a lot of code gets left over. That's one thing. So you have to reuse whatever libraries have already been used. And sometimes that makes you make your thing more complicated than normal, right? Number two, if you're adding some sort of logging or analytics, that just adds more lines of code as well. Like I built one button for Slack, right? And the analytics code for that was like 20, 30 lines just to see how many times it's been clicked. So code multiplies fast really quickly, especially when you're using external dependencies. And also like when styling and stuff, we'll have like so many classes. If we can look at any website, I'll show you afterwards if we have time. And it just gets complicated, but it doesn't have to be, but it's better practice. They know more than I do, so.
Okay.
What's up?
It's like a lot of websites have these like different if you actually ask something else.
Yeah.
That gets compiled into HTML, but people don't like it's less fun to like raw HTML. Like whenever you say React JS, when it gets compiled, like really all mistakes and all stuff. So
Yeah. So for those who couldn't hear him, that's actually really important. So HTML, CSS is losing popularity nowadays because it's a lot of tedious work, and specifically writing JavaScript to change state a lot can be very tedious. So they created libraries like AngularJS, React.js, and basically you type in a similar language to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but slightly different, and that compiles into HTML, CSS, JavaScript later. And what Samuel said is when it does that compilation and conversion, it's not as easy to read as what we did. They do a lot of obfuscation, so you don't know what's going on as a security measure, and that's what creates some confusion, at least. Yeah, let's get right into JavaScript then. So one thing that like basically the most common way of like interacting with a website is a button. You may have guessed it. So if we wanted to add a button, we would just say click me and I'm just going to remove this GIF for now. We can add it back later. What I did was comment out this code. Whenever you comment something, it won't actually get run. But we see this button. I'm clicking it. It's doing nothing, right? We want it to do something. So let's add some JavaScript. So the way to do that, I also don't remember off the top of my head. So I'm going to copy this. And add it to this head tag. So whatever's in the head doesn't actually get shown to the user. It's more used for things like search engine optimization or loading scripts and different style sheets. So this was loading a style sheet. This is loading a script. And now we have to, just like the same process here, we have to add something to our static page, which this time is going to be scripts. And let's make it main.js. And what we're going to do now is we want to do something when we click on the button, right? Let's do an on click and we can say hi. So this is a function that I'm going to write in main.js. So the way you do that is you say function, say hi, and don't worry about memorizing these syntax. It's going to take a while. Even I don't remember it all the time, but it's basically saying this is where I'm pointing. When I saw the on click say hi, I'm going to send my code to go to this line too, and I'll alert hi. All right, let's see if this works. So now whenever we refresh this and I click this, see it alerted hi, because now it's running logic. And that's what you do is you use JavaScript to take information. So typically the most common use for the early internet was forms. People would type in information, hit submit, all of that data would get sent through a form, and bam, like that's all done through JavaScript. Any questions so far, or all making sense? Good stuff. So now let's get a bit fancier. Let's add an input, because a lot of times we are using forms, right? So let's have an input, and the type will be, let's say it's a number, right? And let's see what that looks like. So now we can type in numbers here and type it in, but we can't type in letters. So cool thing about input types is you can make it a file upload input, you can make it numbers, you can even make it passwords. And one thing that's a cool trick, I'll show you actually. This has saved me a lot, so I want you all to know. I feel like a hacker every time I do it, but we have this input. Oh, what? Okay, see how it looks like these black circles? If you ever want to know what's inside, like you forgot a password and it's saved, you can inspect element, click on this type, change it to text, boom, you hacked your own password. And that's pretty useful for me because I forget a lot, but it shows the different types of input types. And yeah, that's why it's important to think about security. Everything on the front end is effectively not secure. You have to assume the worst. But let's change this back to, I guess we'll just do text. Okay, so now we want to type in something, and I want this click me to say what I typed in, right? Because we want to be able to extract information and send it through APIs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign an ID here, and I'm going to say this is my input for hi, right? So this is just, IDs are just ways to access different tags because otherwise they have no information that identifies them. It's just like a name. And what I'm going to do here in my main.js now and say let message equals document.getElement.by ID. What did I ID it? I named it input for hi. Okay, so now we have this input for hi, and I want this message to be alerted. So just a quick thing here. Let is just something you put before you declare any variable. A variable is just a box, right? It stores information and it has a label on it. So the label for this box is message, and we have some information in it. And whenever I want to access that information, I can just say message. I don't need to know what's actually inside that box, which is really clutch. And now I'm going to alert whatever the message is. I don't know what it's going to be. It depends on what the user types. And sorry, I need to add dot value here. So what this is doing now, document.getElementById is saying, okay, let's look at this document we have. Let's find that ID, get the HTML element for that. And whenever I do dot value, it's going to tell me what's inside of that. It gives me the value of it. This dot, whatever comes after is dependent on the tag. Dot value is unique for inputs. So let's go here. And I'm going to say null is cool. Click here, and boom. We were able to take information that the user provided, access it, store it in that variable box, and do something with it. So now the next use case I'm going to show you is a form example, and I'll let you take in a lot of information and take advantage of few Flask's useful features and do something cool with it. So before we do that, any questions? Yeah.
So this is like one of the native languages of aspect why you do this demonstration of this Python.
Yeah.
So then, like, is there no improvement in functionality with like an on to
Yeah, that's a great question. So with on-click specifically, there's no functionality because whenever you are going to be using Python, you have to at least be able to send the information from the front end to the back end. But at the very least, you'll need to just collect the data, store it in some sort of structure, then send it to Python, and then you can do all the work if you don't want to write JavaScript. But at the very least, you have to get the information from the website, if that makes sense. And then Python can do all the data processing. Does that kind of make sense?
that's why is on click specific to that's functions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. React and JavaScript have a lot of similar UI if you've used React, but let's talk about your use case. Now we're going to write some Python code. So hopefully you'll get to see the difference. So what I'm going to do now is I've pre-written this because it'll take too long otherwise, but I'm going to create 2 more HTML files as student.html. So every time you want to add more HTML files for different pages or templates, we do this. Oh, sorry, student.html. And I'm going to paste this. And I'm going to have result.html. And paste this. And now let's add in some Flask logic. Okay, and let's just say this renders at student. So let's just take a quick look. I did a lot in a short amount of time. I created a new route called /student. So now whenever we go to student, it's going to open this HTML file. I created a new route for results. So whenever we go here, it's going to open this HTML file after we use some Python code, which is what Ben was talking about. Like, what's the point, right? Okay. So let's just run this now. Uh-oh. Is overriding existing? Oh, I pasted this into the wrong file. Sorry, one sec. Which one were we on? I have too much stuff open. I think it's this one. Yeah. Yeah, this was the one we had. So let's go to app.py. Yeah, this was the one we were working with. And once again, we got the red squiggly line. I'm going to import this and it's flask.request. You just kind of learn like what you need to import or just Google the error. That's what I do a lot of times. And okay, now let's take a look. So what we did was we created the student route and this result route. So let's just see what happens if we run this. No errors, let's go. Go to student and boom. So let's look at student.html real quick, just as a quick refresher. We have this new thing called form. And over here, we have an action for the form. So it says, go to this website and do a post request whenever we're done. And if we look here, the /result, right? It's what we have here. So whatever information we input here is going to be sent to this endpoint. So Ben, what I was trying to say is no matter what you do, you have to go to endpoint to send information. You can't like directly go to on-click event. You need a form or something. Does that make sense? Okay, I'll try to clarify a bit, but I know it gets a bit confusing, like when to use what, but so let's go back here. Student.html, all we have is a bunch of paragraph tags and inputs. Paragraph tag input, and we can kind of see this right here. It's nothing new. We've seen all of this before, right? But now, let's actually put in stuff. So Tejas, I'm terrible at physics, I'm terrible at chemistry and math. These are my grades. I'm gonna hit submit. and boom, it shows me this. So what it did was it sent information from that student page to the result page. And how did it do that? It did it through a form. And let's look at the logic in app.py. So one thing that we have to do is we have to add methods that tells you whether it's a get request, a post request. So in this case, it takes in a post request. And that's just whenever you're saving information. Whenever you're sending like actual data, it's post request. Whenever you're getting data, it's a get request. So just memorize that. It can be a bit confusing, but don't worry too much about it. So if it's a post request, we're getting the result from the form, and I can access the different attributes based off of the name in this student.html. So see how the name is capital name, capital physics, lowercase chemistry, capital mathematics. I was able to access all results from the form here and store them in these variables. So even Python has their variables. You just don't need to put let in front of them. You can just declare them like that. And boom, here's where the magic is. We're returning render template result.html, but we're passing in some information. I'm going to pass in a math variable, a chem variable, a physics variable, and a name variable. And if we look at result.html, whenever you have these double curly braces, you can actually put in these variable names here. And it won't say name, it won't say math, it'll say my actual name and the actual grade I got, because it's a variable that can change and is sent from Flask. So that's basically what happened here. Let's stop and pause for questions. Kind of a lot happened here on a scale of, yeah, let's look. Oh yeah. There was a button tag. Oh, sorry. So that's an interesting thing. I didn't notice this before either. You can actually have an input that's a button. So it doesn't have to be a button. It could also be an input tag with type submit. And we can see that here in the student page. Inspect element. It looks exactly like a button, but it's used for forms. Yeah, it's input type submit. Yeah, any other questions? I know we suddenly sped up quite a bit. So on a scale of like, I get this completely to this, where are y'all at right now? Material, what was the most confusing thing you think of? Where was it, John? Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. So just a personal story about myself. My dad would force me to go to all these like coding summer camps when I was a bit younger. I would literally spend the whole week, and after the first lecture, be lost and then just coding for the rest of the time. Because like a lot of the stuff, you just have to look at it for a few hours and then it started making sense. So it's a time thing, and I don't think anyone can explain it as long as you like keep trying again and again, and it'll slowly settle in. I've been looking at this for years, and it's finally starting to make sense. But if there's a specific question, definitely let me know, because all of the syntax from HTML to Python to JavaScript, we introduced 3 different languages and they all look different. So you have to get used to the syntax. But yeah, now let's actually, how do we get this to the internet? Because I'm in localhost right now, right? None of y'all can access this link. This is where I got stuck the most, is deploying this to where everyone can use it. And typically, like I said before, you utilize cloud computing to do this. So if you make a static website or a React website, some of the best options are Netlify and Firebase. You can host your website for free. All you have to do is buy a domain, and as long as you aren't getting like millions of users, like there's a quota of how much free like processing they can do for you. And most of the time, if you're hitting that quota, then you're doing so well, you'll have other things to worry about than the cost. So that's good news, is that it's pretty free. I'm going to be using Google Cloud Platform's App Engine to deploy this. It's probably one of the best ways to deploy Flask specifically. And this is where I had a lot of issues last night, so hopefully everything will run correctly. But let's just see, how do we take the simple application and turn it into something everyone can use? And before we do that, before we deploy, do y'all have any requests for the website? Any different types of tags y'all want to cover? Images, or should we just deploy it? All right, we're all set for launch then. So I'm gonna, because it takes like a while to deploy, I made a few like scripts that actually, let me open it. So just bear with me while I get these scripts that I wrote. Let's copy this. So now I'm going to introduce one more programming language to y'all. We've gone over HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Python. And now this is going to be called Bash, which is what you use whenever you open up a terminal here. Sorry, terminal. And type in some different commands. This is like at its core how you communicate with your computer. This is called Bash. So we're going to be working a bit with this right now. Let's just copy this. Was this the one we were working with? Untitled 2. Okay. And I'm just going to paste that script called deploy.sh and secret.sh. Okay, so I had some sort of sensitive information in secret sh relating to billing information. That's why I'm not going to show it to y'all. But all it's doing is it's saving that billing information into this variable called my account ID, right? So let's just get into the process of how do you deploy any application from this Flash server now that it's running well locally. First thing you have to do is create an account on Google Cloud. So you just go on Google Cloud. They actually give you a free trial. I can show you, like, I have my own projects here, and it basically shows you like different attributes of your project. And these are all the services they provide. You can have storage. You can have compute things that deploy your products like Cloud Run, Cloud Functions. You can have databases. You can have networking stuff. You can have logging. Like, they just made so much. I'm just so impressed. But you can even do a lot of AI stuff like image classification, natural language processing. And it really goes infinitely. And you get a free trial of either $200 or $300 whenever you create an account. So let's just get started with the deploy process. So let's take a look here. What do we want to call this project? Someone just shout out a name. Neil, huh? Sample site. Now, okay, this has to be unique. So I'm gonna put in a few like random numbers as well, just to make sure it's unique. Otherwise, I'll throw an error. What we're doing here now is we're importing our requirements.txt. So this is the file that tells Google these are all the packages we used to actually build this product. So it's gonna basically download all these packages on the Google server that we're using. And most of these just come with Flask. Don't worry about it too much. This is just making sure our project ID is saved. This is installing the App Engine Python version so we can deploy it using our computer. This is basically the settings we're using. I'm using basically default settings here. I'm happy to share this file with anyone if they want after this. And this is creating the actual project, setting it as a default. This is one thing that's a bit annoying. With any product using App Engine, you have to have billing enabled and attach a credit card. Even though you won't get charged unless you get a lot of traffic, it's something you got to do. And you have $200 or $300 of free trial. And this is just enabling cloud build, creating the actual project, and deploy. So nothing too complex, but we would have had to run each of these commands individually. What Bash does nicely is I just put them all in one file and I can run it in one go. So I'm going to run /secret sh in this one. Where is our untitled? And yeah, hopefully y'all are more organized than me whenever you do this in the future. Okay. So now you can just run /secret.sh. Uh-oh. Sorry. I changed the wrong. This should be sample project. Octoshop 2. Okay. Oh, must start with the lower. So see, whenever you're coding, typically developers give you nice errors that tell you exactly what's wrong. And if you want, you can just copy this and paste it in like Google and it tells you what's wrong typically. Here it gave me a pretty good error message. It's saying it must start with the lowercase. And I think I started it with, I have like uppercase letters here. So let's just do this. Oh, sorry, not here. And let's run this. Okay, wait, let's see. What is wrong here? Project IDs must be between 6 and 30 characters. So look at us still not reading what they told us. This has around 6 to 30, I think. Let's run it one more time. All right, let's go. I think it actually worked. If it takes time, that means it's hopefully working. So now it's creating the service, and this will take a long time to build. So until that time, I'm happy to answer any question.
So, for the website, it's allows, yeah, but it's like
Yeah, that's a great question. So the answer to that is sometimes Wix is the right answer. If you're building something that doesn't require that much application logic and actually coding, Wix is better because you can get it done faster. It's more expensive, unfortunately. So you have to keep that in mind. And overall, it's nice for displaying information, but you can't do that much logic, if that makes sense. You can't really call APIs if I know liners. I'm not going to say it's personally. And it's just less customizable. A lot of Wix websites look kind of similar when you put a unique brand identity. Okay, so right here, it's asking me for where do I want my server. So what's interesting about cloud platforms is they have a lot of different server locations, which adds a good level of redundancy. This I actually got asked in an interview, but like, I'll actually ask y'all. Suppose the internet is down specifically for one website, right? And that website was hosted in South America. Why would it not work in the US if it's hosted in South America? What could have happened to those servers make them go down? So the thing you have to think about is whenever things go down, it doesn't have to be around you because a server could go down. And something like an earthquake could make all of these servers just stop working, a fire, or even just a malfunction of a cloud center. So what these cloud providers do to stop that is redundancy across regions. They'll have something in Florida, something in Cuba, something in Alaska. I mean, those are actually bad examples because those are really expensive places to host servers. But the idea is geographical redundancy. But you have to pay for that. I'm not going to pay for that. I'm going to just say, I'll take my chances with US Central. That's the closest to Texas. And it's still somewhat redundant. Like they have different servers across the US Central area and it can switch. And interestingly enough, every computer can only handle a certain amount of users. This is what a lot of companies struggle with is once you cross that threshold, like you go from 1 million to 10 million, one server can't handle 10 million people. You'll have to use multiple servers and route one person to this server, one person to the other, and slowly expand. So lots of big problems happen when a website suddenly gets a lot of traffic, like Aftershock. A lot of things were crashing because he wasn't able to scale it up correctly. And scaling has to do with creating more and more servers and routing people appropriately. And you have to have a sense of statelessness such that even though someone's accessing your website from a different server, they should still get the same results. So you shouldn't have too many things that are dependent on the server. It should work the same just by the code you write. Oh, okay. And this is the confirmation. Is all of this good? And I'm going to say, yeah, let's go for it. And this is the longest part. And last night when I was doing this, it failed like 10 out of 12 times. So what's up?
Good question. So this is like not exactly what related to what you just said, but like a lot of companies use CDNs or content delivery networks to as like backups, or actually it's just like to get faster access for clients to your websites.
Yeah.
And so let's say the server related to the CDN like dies, or you know whatever earthquake happens, right?
Yeah.
And so you lose that server. does the CDN switch to a different server as a backup?
Right. CDN specifically, I'm not too familiar with. I actually want to learn a lot more about them. But I'm sure that's what happened because if it's a delivery network, that implies that it has a lot of different like components of it, different computers. So I'm sure they have a level of redundancy, otherwise they wouldn't work nearly as well as they do. But yeah, that's a good point. And CDNs, for people who don't know, lots of image sharing platforms are served on content delivery networks. And I'm not sure exactly how they become faster, but if you put URLs from these content delivery networks, it's just faster to load them up. I think it's due to geographical proximity, but yeah. So far, no errors, right? Okay. Good stuff. Any other questions or any idea? Yeah, what's up?
I have a question. So like you mentioned like geographic
Yeah.
So like, is that why like you mentioned it's like having servers in like different countries and stuff? For example, I'm a huge gamer, so we're watching yeah, and I know that there's like North American servers, and European servers, and Australian servers. You're just watching these Twitch streamers in Australia, or something like that. Yeah, the server was based in America, and everything. So like, could you explain that kind of like, is that why like companies like yeah, is that why?
Yeah, that's exactly why. And I'm not a EC major or like anything low level, so I'm gonna do my best to not botch this explanation up. Whenever you make an internet request, the internet's really complicated because first it goes from your computer through either an Ethernet port or through your Wi-Fi into your router. And from that router, it takes a really complicated route from one server to another server to another server to another server to another server until you reach your destination. So if you're farther away, you'll have to go through a really long path to get information. And that's just due to geographical distancing, because there's actually a fiber cable across everywhere, and internet uses that fiber cable to process information. That's how it bounces through between different servers and hotspots. And who here has heard of Tesla's like new satellite, Starlink? Yeah. So what's awesome about them is,
I was really like he's heard of it.
oh yeah, Kevin, Mr. Tesla. But basically the way that it works and what's so exciting is it doesn't have this cable dependency. It uses lasers actually. It transfers data through these lasers from the satellite up onto different hubs. So it's much faster to get information across the world. And it's much less likely that a cable will get damaged versus a satellite. Like, I don't know about future space warfare and stuff. That's going to be terrible. But right now, the space is relatively safe for things and is considered a much higher reliability rate of getting information. And that's how like Elon Musk was able to restore internet to Ukraine after he gave them access to Starlink, which is pretty incredible. Oh yeah, updating service. This may take several minutes, so we have 7 minutes to kill. What's that?
So is that any different? So it's like someone's in Australia. Yeah, is that like, yeah, and then is that why people say VPNs are faster?
VPNs are actually usually slower. They're more secure though. And this is like, I was actually in India a few weeks ago, and over there TikTok is banned, or even if you have like school restrictions, right? A lot of things get banned. So you can use a VPN to bypass that stuff because what it's doing is it's sending all your internet traffic to a different server, and that server is doing the request. So if my server, see me here, if that server is in like the US, I used a US VPN while I was in India. I was able to access all TikTok content because it go from India to the US to TikTok servers. So the actual blockage comes from India going to the US, but the US isn't blocked for India. It's TikTok. So that's how VPNs work. They're slower because you have to take that longer route. But also be careful using free VPNs because they can, all the information you're sending, there's nothing stopping them from saving it all and like leaking it, selling it, whatever they want to do. So use a VPN you trust, typically one you have to pay for. Yeah, I don't really know too many good free VPNs. I just say, I'll take the risk. What are they going to do with my information? That's not good advice, by the way.
I have a question.
What's up?
Like, so
Yeah.
Mind explaining that a little bit more, like images, so like Discord, maybe even use some CDN, like all those images save on servers, like close to me.
Yeah. I'm gonna do my best because I don't know. But at Slack, I tried asking someone who used the Slack CDN to explain it to me, and he mentioned it kind of like you said. It's all about proximity. So there's this notion of edge computing that's getting really popular, right? Edge computing is you do all the processing on the edge, which means on your phone, on your laptop, and that makes it fast because it's all being done there. And this is things that aren't too computationally expensive, so our phone and laptop can do it. And with CDNs basically pre-fetch information from the centralized servers and are more lightweight, I think, and they're closer to you. So that's why you can get information faster. Oh, shit. Okay. I think it worked. Let's see. Yes. Okay. I'm going to create a shortened link for y'all. I'm just going to plug my own website, but let's call this CSBA. And let's save this here. You can either scan the QR code or just go to tage.one/CSBA. And you should be able to access what we built today. Let me know if it works. Yeah. This is my Entrepreneurshop. Yeah. I mean, I'll try to work it. It didn't work.
Or I guess
Oh, the QR code didn't work. Interesting. Okay, y'all found bugs. Good job. Let's see if this works. Yeah. That's interesting. Wait, so the QR code went to google.com?
Yeah.
Oh, that's weird. Okay.
Search for entrepreneurshop.com/CSBA.
Oh, oh, you have to put it in the browser. Or I can like just let me scan the QR code and see what. Like you have to actually put in like HTTPS/ or just put in your browser and it should work. Wait, that Kevin's just for everyone. Kevin and I made a website before, and this dude's marketing is insane. He uses what I like to call guerrilla marketing for social media. Just goes through every social channel you can see, and that's actually how we tried advertising this event.
They use TikTok though.
Yeah. TikTok's crazy. It's like really interesting because everyone's so casual on TikTok. When you're advertising a website, I really like the way Rithvik did it for those of y'all who saw it. He literally just flipped his phone camera, showed it all. It's really interesting. And if are any of y'all big on TikTok? Just for content creators? Are you? You make TikToks? You trying to show us a dance? All right. Was it able to work for most people? All right. I hope this workshop was pretty cool and useful. And now you at least know a little bit. I know there's a lot of like new information here in terms of languages and syntax, but I hope now when you have an idea, you at least know how to get started, build a working website, deploy it. And this is all for free. You have to buy a domain name, but if you want to get started, it's just going to do .uc.r.appspot.com completely free. So these are small hacks. Some people pay like, if you use Wix and stuff, the problem is you end up paying like $80 a month just to have a custom domain. But yeah. All right. Any last questions? I'm also going to be here for a while after going one-on-one questions about how do you build your specific business. But with that, y'all are free to go.
And
Thanks.
And thank you all for staying the entire time. If you would like to have a box of pizza, we're going to take one. Yeah, like I said, this is one of our first events where we're advertising to the public. We're going to be having a lot more next year. And so if you're on campus and you see us starting to work, we'd really appreciate if you found this useful to share like similar events with your friends and get others to come. So yeah, feel free to grab a pizza on the way out.